Is this still the most comfortable sleeping pad? The REI Helix has been the most comfortable sleeping pad for me for years now. But Zenbivy recently released a pad that is similar in weight, warmth, and design, and has the potential to be the new GOAT when it comes to comfortable sleeping pads. I've thoroughly tested both of these sleeping pads individually, but I've also been spending multiple nights A/B testing them, where I switch from one pad to the other pad over the course of the night in order to determine which one is better in 3 different categories. Those categories are warmth, design, and most importantly, comfort. Those are the 3 categories that I prioritize when I want to be as comfortable as possible on a backpacking trip. Talking about warmth with these 2 sleeping pads is interesting because they have similar R values at 4.9 and 4.8 respectively, and they use the same kind of technology in order to provide that R value insulation. They both use 2 layers of reflective film suspended inside of the pads, and because of the way the pads are designed, that reflective film actually stays suspended. It doesn't fall to the bottom of the pad like with some other sleeping pads and then render it essentially useless, and then you end up getting cold over the course of the night. I've slept on both these pads on cold ground in sub-freezing conditions and been toasty warm on both of them. I've been very impressed with both these pads and how they perform under cold conditions, especially when you do have other pads out there with R values in that 4 range, Big Agnes repeat, that may not live up to that R value once you really start to push them. All that being said, I can't definitively say if one of these pads is warmer than the other. With the testing that I've done with both of them and the A/B testing, it's just too close to call. They're both good pads when it comes to warmth. Even though these pads look very similar, the nuanced design differences have actually been a very big deal for me. Starting with the valves and how you inflate the pads, you can see on the Zenbivy here that the valve is on top of the pad, whereas with the REI Helix, it's on the bottom of the pad here, and you have both a deflation valve and an inflation valve, where it's all in one with the Zenbivy, which is really nice, fewer points of failure, and just an easier system overall. I really like when valves are on top of the pad because it makes it a lot easier to adjust how much air is inside the pad while you're actually laying on it. If your pad is kind of deflating a little bit due to air temperatures cooling off, then you can just blow into it, inflate the pad a little bit. Or if your pad is too firm, you can open up the first flap of the valve and press on it and let out a little bit of air in order to soften it up. With the REI Helix and the valves being on the bottom of the pad, it just makes it a little bit more difficult to access them. You could flip the pad over and sleep on it upside down, but I've tested that out a couple times, and I kind of have this feeling that it makes the pad sleep colder, just the way that the suspended reflective film inside then kind of falls inside the pad. So I often sleep on it right side up just in order to maximize the warmth. When it comes to inflation, both pads come with a pump sack. What's interesting with the Zenbivy is that the stuff sack doubles as the pump sack. So you pull out this extension collar and then you can use that as the pump sack. The problem with that is it doesn't provide a lot of air volume, so it takes quite a few pump sack kind of repetitions in order to inflate the Zenbivy. Whereas the REI Helix, you just have a standard pump sack that's stuffed into the bottom of the stuff sack, but it's a lot bigger. So it takes a lot fewer repetitions in order to inflate the REI Helix pad. The shape of the pads has actually been something that I was surprised that I'd have a strong opinion on. And a lot of that has to do with the types of pillows that I use. I often use a pillow with a pad strap on it, so this squared off top to the REI Helix holds onto the pad straps a lot better, whereas this kind of curved top to the Zenbivy allows the pad straps to kind of slide up a little bit, and then sometimes the pillows fall off. So I have to really make sure that the pad strap on the pillow is on the flatter, more squared off part of the Zenbivy, whereas I don't need to worry about that with the REI Helix. I can have the pillow right on the end, which maximizes the length of the pad. No matter what sleeping pad you go with, whether it's one of these ones or something else, I highly recommend getting a 25-inch wide sleeping pad if you want to maximize comfort while you're out on trail. Both of these pads kind of taper towards the foot end, but not in a significant way. Other sleeping pads out there definitely taper a lot more, and I don't notice that I don't have enough space at the foot end for either of these pads. Another factor with these pads is the materials that they're made of. They're both made out of polyester, but the REI Helix is made with a 30 denier polyester, whereas the Zenbivy is made with a 20 denier polyester. I haven't had problems with either of these pads when it comes to durability, but take that with a grain of salt. That's just one data point out of hundreds or even thousands of pads that are out there. So make sure you're looking at reviews on different websites in order to get a good idea of failure points and how much these pads are failing when they're out in the field. I'm doing that constantly as well before I'm filming these reviews, and I haven't come across any sort of trends with either of these pads. That being said, the Zenbivy pad is a lot newer than the REI Helix. REI had some issues with the REI Helix line in the past, but with this new model that came out a couple years ago, it seems like they've really fixed up the quality control problems. When it comes to comfort, there's 4 things that I think are most important in order to determine how comfortable a sleeping pad is. The first thing is top feel, so kind of how soft and how comfortable the top of the pad is to lay on. The second thing is the thickness of the pad. Depending on your body shape and how much you weigh, you may need a thicker or thinner pad in order to optimize your comfort. The third thing is supportiveness, especially once you get to the edge of the pad. You don't want to always feel like you're going to be falling off the pad. And then the fourth thing is pressure relief, especially for those side sleepers out there. You don't want your arm going numb and falling asleep and having hip pain and a whole bunch of issues that you will encounter if you're on a pad that doesn't have good pressure relief. When it comes to top feel, like I mentioned before, both these pads are made with the same material and they have the same kind of top feel. It's not a great top feel, but it's not super rubbery or anything like that. It's just not like a nice soft one that you see on some other pads out there. Both pads are 3 inches thick, which is kind of the minimum, I think, if you want to be comfortable on a sleeping pad and not have your shoulder or your hip bottoming out. For heavier people out there, that's probably not going to be enough. If you're over, let's say 220 pounds and you're a side sleeper and you move around a lot, then you're probably going to bottom out on either of these pads. For supportiveness, both pads are really supportive, and that's due to the quilted baffling pattern that they're made with. Especially once you get to the edges, you just feel a lot of support on there, whereas some other pads out there, once you kind of lean on the side of the pads, they collapse a little bit and you feel like you're going to fall off, or you just do fall off. That's not the case with either of these pads. When it comes to pressure relief, by far the best design that I've tested out of any sleeping pad out there, I've tested dozens and dozens, is this quilted baffling pattern that you see on both these pads. You have these lowered dimpled areas and then these raised areas that when you press on them, they give a little bit and they act kind of like air springs. So as you're laying on the pad, wherever you're laying on these raised areas, they have a little bit of give to them, which provides quite a bit of pressure relief, especially compared to other systems like horizontal baffles or even vertical baffles, which is probably the second best out there. The pads have a different take on that quilted baffling system. With the REI Helix, they're kind of in a grid system, horizontal lines, kind of a box pattern, whereas with the Zenbivy, they're in a diagonal pattern. Zenbivy says they went with this system because it leads to the pad not twisting after you inflate it and a little bit more comfort. I haven't noticed too much. You can see that neither of these pads are really twisted, and as far as comfort goes, they're very similar. There is a difference though. And this is where the A/B testing really came into play, because I found both of these pads very comfortable when I tested them separately. But it wasn't until I tested them side by side, spending a couple hours on the Helix, a couple hours on the Zenbivy, that I noticed a very slight difference that led to the REI Helix being probably 10% more comfortable. And that difference has to do with pressure relief. The REI Helix provides a little bit more pressure relief for me, especially when I'm laying on my side. And I think that's due to the height of the raised areas. It's very, very small, but I think the raised areas on the Helix have a little bit more give to them. They're also maybe a little bit bigger. And because of that, I get more pressure relief compared to the Zenbivy, which sleeps a little bit more like, I don't want to say like a board, because it is very comfortable, especially compared to a lot of the other pads out there, but it is just a little bit more of a firmer mattress. So if you like a firm mattress, then the Zenbivy is probably going to be great for you, maybe if you're a back sleeper. But if you like something with a little bit more pressure relief, then the REI Helix is going to provide that just slightly more. It's a very small difference, and there may be other factors that are going to be changing whether you go with the Helix or the Zenbivy. Price might be one of them. The Zenbivy costs $200, whereas the REI Helix costs $170. Weight could be another factor. The Zenbivy is quite a bit lighter at 602 grams compared to 700 grams for the REI Helix. If you want to get the most comfortable sleep on trail, then you have to check out both these pads. They've changed the game for me. I don't toss and turn nearly as much. I'll slightly shift over the course of the night, but usually it doesn't wake me up, and I wake up feeling so much more refreshed and ready to hike the next day. If you're looking for something maybe a bit warmer, maybe a little bit more ultralight, then go check out this video right up here. I look at some of the top and most popular pads in the market and go over them so that you guys can choose which one might be the best for you.